Captain Elias Drake's ship shuddered violently as another explosion rocked its hull. Warning lights flashed red across the cockpit, casting eerie shadows on his face. His hands gripped the controls tightly, knuckles white from strain. Outside the reinforced glass of the viewport, streaks of fire illuminated the dark void of space. Pieces of debris floated past, remnants of what had once been a proud interstellar vessel. Mayday! Mayday! Elias shouted into the comms, but static was all that replied. He cursed under his breath, knowing he was alone out here. Whatever had attacked him, a sudden ambush in uncharted territory, had crippled his communication systems and left him drifting toward an unknown planet. The autopilot struggled to stabilize the descent, but it was clear the ship wouldn't survive re-entry intact. Flames engulfed the exterior as gravity pulled them closer to the surface below. Through the chaos, Elias caught glimpses of the planet through the viewport. It was barren, a vast expanse of golden sand stretching endlessly beneath a pale orange sky. Jagged mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks sharp like broken teeth. With one final jolt, the ship slammed into the ground, sending shards of metal flying everywhere. Dust filled the air inside the cabin, choking him as he fought to free himself from the wreckage. His body ached, bruised but not broken. Crawling out of the mangled cockpit, Elias collapsed onto the hot sand, gasping for breath. The heat hit him immediately, searing against his skin even through his uniform. He looked back at the remains of his ship, now little more than twisted scrap metal embedded in the dunes. Smoke billowed upward, blending with the haze of the horizon. There would be no repairs, no calling for help. Not here. This place felt lifeless, empty, yet strangely alive somehow, as if the desert itself watched him with silent curiosity. Elias forced himself to stand, brushing sand off his clothes. His survival training kicked in, overriding the shock and fear threatening to overwhelm him. First things first, assess the situation. He retrieved a small pack from the wreckage, salvaging what little food, water, and tools he could find. A single blaster pistol lay among the debris, its power cell half depleted. Better than nothing. As he scanned the horizon, something unusual caught his eye. A faint shimmer near a cluster of jagged rocks about a kilometer away. At first, he thought it might just be heat distortion, a trick of the light playing over the endless dunes. But then he noticed movement, a flicker, barely perceptible, like sunlight reflecting off glass. Curiosity tugged at him, urging him to investigate despite the danger lurking in every step. The trek across the sands was grueling. Each step sank slightly into the soft surface, making progress slow and exhausting. Sweat dripped down his forehead, stinging his eyes, and his throat burned with thirst. Still, he pressed on, driven by instinct and the hope that whatever lay ahead might offer answers, or at least shelter. When he finally reached the rocks, exhaustion weighed heavily on him. He leaned against one of the boulders, catching his breath while scanning the area. That's when he saw it. Lying partially hidden behind a large slab of stone was a figure unlike anything Elias had ever encountered. Its form was humanoid but distinctly alien, covered in sleek armor that glowed faintly with an inner light. One arm hung limply at its side, clearly injured, while the other clutched a strange weapon lying useless in the sand. Blood, or something resembling blood, oozed from wounds scattered across its body, staining the golden grains around it. For a moment, Elias froze, torn between caution and compassion. Was this creature friend or foe? Did it pose a threat, or was it simply another victim of whatever force had brought him here? Logic told him to walk away, to prioritize his own survival. But something deeper, perhaps a shred of humanity buried beneath years of military conditioning, compelled him to act. Kneeling beside the alien, Elias checked for signs of life. Its chest rose and fell weakly, though its breathing was labored. Up close, the glow of its armor pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. Intricate patterns etched into the material shifted and changed as if alive, responding to his presence. Despite its injuries, there was an undeniable sense of power radiating from the being, a quiet strength that commanded respect. Elias hesitated again, weighing his options. Leaving the alien to die would be the safer choice, but it didn't sit right with him. Taking a deep breath, he made his decision. Using all the strength he had left, he hoisted the alien over his shoulder and began dragging it back toward the wreckage of his ship. Every step felt heavier than the last, but he refused to give up. By the time he reached a shallow depression in the sand where he could fashion a crude shelter, night had fallen. The temperature plummeted, turning the scorching heat of the day into biting cold. Wrapping the alien in a thermal blanket scavenged from the crash site, Elias tended to its wounds as best he could. Though unfamiliar with alien physiology, he cleaned the injuries and applied basic antiseptics from his medkit. As he worked, questions swirled in his mind. Who, or what, was this creature? Where did it come from? And most importantly, why had it ended up here, stranded like him on this desolate world? Exhaustion finally claimed him, and Elias drifted into an uneasy sleep, haunted by dreams of explosions, glowing symbols, and eyes watching him from the darkness. When he woke hours later, the alien was still unconscious, but alive. For now, that was enough. Little did Elias know, this chance encounter would change everything, for both of them. Elias woke to the sound of faint clicking. At first, he thought it was just the wind moving through the rocks nearby, but as his senses sharpened, he realized the noise came from somewhere closer, inside the makeshift shelter he built for the alien. Sitting upright, he reached instinctively for the blaster pistol lying beside him, his fingers curling around its grip. The weapon wasn't much, but it gave him a small measure of security in this hostile environment. Peering into the dim light of dawn, Elias saw that the alien had stirred. Its glowing armor pulsed more brightly now, casting soft waves of light across the sand. One of its hands twitched, and its head turned slightly, revealing eyes, or what seemed like eyes, half open beneath a translucent visor. They weren't human eyes. They were larger, multifaceted, shimmering with an iridescent hue that shifted colors depending on how the light hit them. For several tense moments, neither moved. Elias stayed crouched, watching carefully, while the alien studied him with those strange, otherworldly eyes. He couldn't tell if it was assessing him as a threat or simply trying to understand where it was. Finally, the creature let out a low hum, deep and resonant, vibrating through the air like the thrum of distant machinery. "Easy," Elias said softly, raising one hand slowly to show he meant no harm. His voice sounded strange even to himself, echoing against the silence of the desert. "I'm not going to hurt you." The alien didn't respond, at least not verbally. Instead, its chest plate began to glow brighter, pulsating in rhythmic patterns. Tiny symbols appeared on its surface, shifting and rearranging themselves like living code. Each pulse of light seemed deliberate, almost communicative. Elias frowned, leaning forward slightly to get a better look. "What is that?" he murmured aloud, though he didn't expect an answer. Still, the alien reacted. Its glowing patterns intensified, and one of its arms lifted weakly, pointing toward the symbols on its chest plate. Elias hesitated before nodding slowly, interpreting the gesture as some kind of attempt at communication. He grabbed a piece of metal scrap from the wreckage of his ship, a flat fragment about the size of his palm, and used a sharp rock to scratch crude shapes onto its surface. First, he drew a stick figure representing himself, then another next to it, vaguely resembling the alien's form. Beneath the figures, he added two simple lines, one straight, one jagged. Straight for peace, jagged for conflict. It was rudimentary, but it was all he could think of. Holding up the scrap, Elias pointed to the straight line and gestured between himself and the alien. "Peace," he said firmly, hoping the tone of his voice conveyed meaning even if the word itself did not. The alien tilted its head, observing the drawing intently. After a moment, the glowing symbols on its chest changed again, forming a new pattern that repeated several times. Though Elias couldn't decipher it, he sensed intent behind the display. Perhaps it understood, or perhaps it was merely mimicking him out of curiosity. Either way, the tension eased slightly. Over the next few hours, Elias continued tending to the alien's wounds. He cleaned and bandaged cuts that ran along its exposed limbs, marveling at the texture of its skin beneath the damaged armor. It was smooth yet tough, cool to the touch despite the rising heat of the day. Occasionally, the alien emitted soft clicks or hums, which Elias interpreted as responses to pain or discomfort. Despite their differences, there was something almost human about the way it reacted. By midday, the alien seemed stronger, able to sit up partially on its own. Using its uninjured arm, it tapped lightly on its chest plate, drawing Elias's attention back to the glowing symbols. This time, the pattern formed a sequence that looped continuously. Intrigued, Elias picked up the metal scrap again and began replicating the shapes as best he could, scratching furiously into the surface. When he showed the result to the alien, it emitted a series of rapid clicks and leaned closer, studying his work. It took hours, days, even, but bit by bit, they started piecing together a rudimentary language. Elias learned that the alien called itself Kale, or at least that's what he assumed based on the recurring symbol. In turn, Kale seemed to grasp that Elias was human, repeating a similar pattern whenever Elias pointed to himself. Communication remained slow and frustrating, but progress was undeniable. During these exchanges, Elias noticed subtle changes in Cal's demeanor. What had initially been wary detachment softened into something resembling cautious trust. Once, when Elias handed over a ration bar, Cal examined it curiously before taking a tentative bite. The alien's reaction, a mix of surprise and approval, brought an unexpected smile to Elias's face. For the first time since crashing on this planet, he felt a flicker of hope. But not everything was harmonious. There were moments of tension, too. Once, Kale accidentally knocked over a container of water Elias had painstakingly collected from condensation during the night. The loss sent Elias into a brief panic, pacing angrily as he muttered under his breath. Kale watched silently, its glowing symbols dimming momentarily, as if sensing Elias's frustration. When Elias finally calmed down, Kale extended its uninjured hand, placing it gently on the ground near the spilled water. To Elias's astonishment, droplets began forming on the alien's fingertips, pooling together until enough water had gathered to refill the container. "How did you do that?" Elias asked, wide-eyed. Kale responded with a series of glowing patterns that Elias couldn't interpret, but the message was clear. Survival required cooperation. As days passed, their bond deepened. Through trial and error, they learned to rely on each other, not just for survival, but for companionship in this desolate place. Kale taught Elias tricks for navigating the treacherous terrain, such as recognizing safe paths among the razor-sharp crystalline growths scattered across the sands. In return, Elias shared his knowledge of basic engineering, helping Cal repair parts of its damaged weapon, a sleek plasma blade capable of cutting through solid rock. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Kale gestured toward the stars. Its glowing symbols flared brightly, forming constellations that Elias didn't recognize. He realized then that Kale was sharing stories, memories of its home, perhaps, or tales of battles fought long ago. Though he couldn't fully understand, Elias listened intently, captivated by the rhythm of the lights and the emotions they conveyed. For the first time in years, Elias felt connected to someone, something, anything. Out here, stranded on a desert planet millions of miles from Earth, he found solace in the company of an alien warrior who might once have been considered his enemy. And though neither of them knew what lay ahead, they both understood one thing. Together, they stood a better chance of surviving. The days grew hotter, the twin suns merciless in their assault on the desert planet. Elias and Kale worked tirelessly to prepare for their journey across the barren wasteland. They had no choice. Staying near the crash site was not an option. Resources were dwindling. Water was scarce, food even scarcer, and the looming threat of predators made every moment feel like borrowed time. Elias inspected the plasma blade Cal had repaired, marveling at its sleek design. It hummed softly in his hand, a faint blue glow emanating from its edge. Though he didn't fully understand how it worked, he trusted Cal's assurance that it could cut through almost anything. He strapped it to his belt alongside his blaster pistol, feeling slightly more confident about their chances of survival. Cal, meanwhile, used its remaining strength to gather supplies. Its glowing armor pulsed rhythmically as it moved, a sign that it was still recovering from its injuries. Despite its weakened state, Cal carried itself with a quiet dignity, its movements deliberate and precise. Elias couldn't help but admire the alien warrior's resilience. In many ways, Cal reminded him of himself, battle-hardened yet determined to endure. As they prepared to leave, Cal gestured toward the horizon, pointing to a distant range of jagged mountains. Through their rudimentary communication system, Elias understood that Cal believed there might be shelter or resources beyond those peaks, but getting there would be dangerous. The path was littered with hazards, fields of crystalline growths, sharp enough to slice through steel, massive sandworms capable of swallowing entire vehicles, and unpredictable electrical storms that crackled across the sky without warning. "We'll stick together," Elias said firmly, though he knew Cal couldn't fully grasp his words. Still, the aliens seemed to understand the sentiment, nodding once before leading the way. Their first challenge came sooner than expected. A few hours into their trek, they encountered a field of towering crystal formations. Each one stood taller than a man, their surfaces glinting dangerously in the sunlight. Elias approached cautiously, running his fingers over one of the crystals. It felt cold to the touch, almost brittle, but when he tapped it gently with the butt of his blaster, it emitted a high-pitched whine that echoed eerily through the air. "Careful," Elias muttered, stepping back instinctively. He turned to see Cal already scanning the area, its glowing symbols flashing rapidly. The alien pointed to a narrow gap between two clusters of crystals, signaling that they should take that route. Navigating the field was nerve-wracking. Every step felt precarious, as if the ground beneath them might shatter into razor-sharp shards at any moment. Twice, Elias nearly tripped over hidden fragments buried in the sand. Each time, Cal steadied him with a firm grip, its armored hand surprisingly gentle despite its size. Just as they reached the far side of the crystal field, disaster struck. A deep rumble shook the ground, followed by a deafening roar. From the corner of his eye, Elias saw movement, a massive sandworm erupting from beneath the surface, its body coiled and writhing like a living storm. Sand sprayed everywhere as the creature lunged toward them, jaws wide open and lined with rows of jagged teeth. "Run," Elias shouted, grabbing Cal's uninjured arm and pulling the alien forward. They sprinted across the open dunes, the sandworm hot on their heels. Its shadow loomed large behind them, blotting out the sun as it surged closer with terrifying speed. Elias spotted a cluster of boulders up ahead and veered toward them, hoping to find cover. Cal matched his pace, moving with surprising agility despite its earlier injuries. As they reached the rocks, Elias drew his blaster pistol and fired blindly at the sandworm, aiming for its gaping maw. The shots ricocheted harmlessly off its thick hide, but the noise startled the creature, causing it to hesitate momentarily. Seizing the opportunity, Cal activated the plasma blade. With a swift motion, it sliced through one of the nearby crystals, sending shards flying in all directions. The largest piece struck the sandworm squarely in the eye, eliciting a piercing shriek as the beast thrashed violently. Blood, or something resembling blood, spilled onto the sand, staining it crimson. The sandworm retreated, burrowing back beneath the surface with a final tremor. Exhausted, Elias collapsed against the rocks, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. Cal stood beside him, its glowing armor dimming slightly as if reflecting its exhaustion. That was too close, Elias panted, wiping sweat from his brow. Kel responded with a series of soft clicks, tilting its head toward the horizon. Elias nodded grimly, understanding the message. They couldn't afford to rest for long. Their journey continued, each step bringing new challenges. At one point, they were caught in the middle of an electrical storm, bolts of lightning crackling overhead as static electricity danced across the sand. Kel shielded Elias with its body, using its armor to absorb the worst of the discharge. Another time, they stumbled upon a shallow cave filled with bioluminescent fungi. The light they emitted provided temporary relief from the oppressive darkness of night, allowing them to rest safely for a few precious hours. Through it all, their bond deepened. Elias began to rely on Kel's instincts just as much as Kel relied on his resourcefulness. Together, they solved problems neither could have tackled alone. When Kel's water-gathering ability faltered due to fatigue, Elias devised a makeshift filter using materials from the wreckage. When Elias struggled to climb a steep ridge, Kel offered a steadying hand, lifting him effortlessly over the edge. But their shared struggles weren't limited to the environment. One evening, as they huddled around a small fire fueled by dry brush, Kel revealed fragments of its past through glowing symbols and gestures. Elias pieced together the story. Kel was part of a scouting mission sent to investigate reports of strange activity in this sector of space. Their ship had been ambushed by an unknown force, swarms of biomechanical drones that attacked without warning, consuming everything in their path. Kel's crew had been wiped out, leaving it stranded and injured. Elias listened intently, recognizing the pain in Kel's actions, the slight tremor in its hands, the brief flicker of its glowing patterns. He realized then that they weren't so different after all. Both of them were survivors, haunted by loss, and driven by a desire to make it through another day. "What are we dealing with?" Elias asked aloud, staring into the flames. "Those things, what destroyed your ship, are they here?" Kel's response was immediate. Its glowing symbols flared brightly, forming a pattern Elias hadn't seen before. He interpreted it as a warning. Yes, the threat was real, and it was close. The next morning, they discovered proof of Kel's fears. Scattered across the sands were remnants of metallic husks, twisted, insect-like creatures fused with organic material. Some were partially buried, others lying intact as if frozen mid-movement. Elias examined one closely, noting the intricate webbing of circuits beneath its carapace. Whatever these things were, they weren't natural. "They're machines," Elias muttered, tracing a finger along the edge of the husk, "but alive somehow." Kel clicked urgently, pointing toward the horizon. In the distance, a dark cloud hovered low to the ground, shimmering faintly as it moved. It wasn't dust, it was a swarm, thousands of tiny drones converging on their position. "Time to move," Elias said, gripping the plasma blade tightly. Kel nodded, its glowing armor brightening as it prepared for battle. Side by side, they ran once more, the swarm closing in behind them. The desert stretched endlessly before them, offering no safe haven in sight. But Elias refused to give up. With Kel by his side, he knew they stood a chance, even against the odds. The swarm closed in fast, a relentless tide of biomechanical drones that shimmered like liquid metal under the twin suns. Elias and Kel sprinted across the desert, their boots kicking up clouds of sand as they pushed themselves to the limit. The buzzing grew louder with every passing second, vibrating through the air like an ominous warning. Though neither spoke, both understood the stakes. If they didn't find shelter soon, the swarm would overwhelm them. Elias glanced over his shoulder, catching glimpses of the drone's jagged forms darting erratically through the sky. They moved with unnatural speed, their insect-like bodies glinting menacingly as they homed in on their prey. Each step felt heavier than the last, exhaustion weighing down his legs, but he forced himself to keep moving. Beside him, Kel ran with equal determination, its glowing armor pulsating faster, signaling urgency, or perhaps fear. "There," Elias shouted, pointing ahead. A cluster of rocky outcrops jutted out from the sands like broken teeth, offering some semblance of cover. Without hesitation, they veered toward it, weaving between boulders until they reached a narrow crevice. It wasn't much, but it was enough to shield them from the worst of the swarm. Cale gestured for Elias to stay back, while it positioned itself at the entrance, plasma blade raised and ready. The alien's posture radiated focus, its multifaceted eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Elias crouched low, clutching the blaster pistol tightly, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the swarm now, a deafening hum that drowned out all other sounds, as it descended upon their position. The first wave hit hard. Drones slammed into the rocks, their metallic bodies shattering on impact, but quickly reforming into new shapes. Some crawled along the ground, others hovered menacingly in the air, searching for weaknesses in their defenses. Cale swung the plasma blade with precision, slicing through the nearest attackers with ease. The weapon emitted a soft whine as it cut through the biomechanical husks, leaving trails of molten metal in its wake. Elias fired his blaster, aiming for the larger drones trying to flank them. The shots connected, sending sparks flying as the creatures disintegrated into fragments. But there were too many of them, pouring in endlessly like a flood. Every drone they destroyed seemed to be replaced by two more, their numbers overwhelming. "We can't hold them off forever," Elias yelled, his voice barely audible over the chaos. Cale responded with a series of rapid clicks, its glowing symbols flashing urgently. Elias interpreted the message. Retreat deeper into the crevice. Backing away slowly, they retreated further into the narrow passage, using the terrain to their advantage. The drones struggled to navigate the tight space, their bulky forms scraping against the walls as they tried to follow. Cale took advantage of the bottleneck, cutting down any drone that dared approach. Its movements were fluid and calculated, each strike deliberate and efficient. Despite their efforts, the situation grew dire. Elias's blaster overheated, forcing him to rely on hand-to-hand combat with a makeshift spear fashioned from a shard of crystal. Sweat dripped down his face, stinging his eyes as he fought alongside Cale, their backs pressed together in a desperate bid to survive. Finally, after what felt like hours, the swarm began to thin. The remaining drones hesitated, hovering uncertainly before retreating into the distance. Silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing and the faint hum of Cale's armor. Elias sank to his knees, his body trembling with exhaustion. That was insane. He panted, wiping blood from a shallow cut on his cheek. Cale leaned against the wall, its glowing patterns dimming slightly as it recovered from the ordeal. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of what they'd just endured hanging heavily in the air. But survival came at a cost. As Elias examined their surroundings, he noticed something troubling. The crevice they had taken refuge in led to a dead end. There was no way forward, and the drones would likely return once they regrouped. Trapped and running out of options, Elias felt frustration bubbling to the surface. "This isn't working," he muttered bitterly, slamming a fist against the rock wall. "We're stuck here, and those things are going to tear us apart." Cale clicked softly, placing a steady hand on Elias's shoulder. Its glowing symbols flared briefly, forming a pattern Elias recognized as reassurance. Then, without warning, Cale activated the plasma blade again and began carving into the rock face. "What are you doing?" Elias asked, watching in confusion as Cale worked tirelessly. The alien ignored him, focusing intently on the task at hand. After several minutes, a small opening appeared in the wall, revealing a dark tunnel beyond. "Is this safe?" Elias questioned skeptically, peering into the darkness. Cale nodded firmly, gesturing for him to follow. With no other choice, Elias stepped inside, relying on the faint glow of Cale's armor to light the way. The tunnel twisted and turned unpredictably, leading them deeper beneath the surface of the planet. The air grew cooler, carrying with it a strange metallic scent that made Elias uneasy. Strange markings etched into the walls caught his attention. Symbols similar to those displayed on Cal's armor, glowing faintly as if alive. "These look familiar," Elias said, tracing one of the markings with his fingers. Cal clicked in agreement, its own symbols aligning with the ones on the wall. It was clear they were following a path left behind by whoever, or whatever, had created this place. As they ventured further, the tunnel opened up into a vast cavern filled with towering crystalline structures. The crystals pulsed with an inner light, casting colorful reflections across the chamber. At the center stood a massive machine, dormant but unmistakably advanced. Its design was unlike anything Elias had ever seen, blending organic curves with mechanical precision. Cal approached the machine cautiously, its glowing patterns shifting rapidly as it analyzed the device. Elias joined it, studying the control panel embedded in the side of the structure. Symbols resembling those on Cal's armor lit up as he touched the surface, prompting a low hum to resonate through the cavern. "You think we can use this?" Elias asked, turning to Cal. The alien nodded, though its posture suggested uncertainty. Working together, they began experimenting with the controls, piecing together fragments of knowledge gleaned from their shared experiences. Hours passed as they deciphered the machine's purpose. It was a power generator, capable of producing energy on a scale far beyond human technology. More importantly, it seemed linked to a network of tunnels spreading throughout the planet, potentially providing a means of escape. But activating the machine came with risks. As they worked, tremors shook the cavern, causing loose rocks to fall from the ceiling. The machine sputtered to life, emitting bursts of energy that illuminated the entire chamber. Cal shielded Elias from the worst of the discharge, its armored body absorbing the shock. "It's working," Elias exclaimed, excitement replacing his earlier despair. But the victory was short-lived. The activation triggered another swarm of drones, this time emerging from hidden vents within the cavern walls. Dozens of them poured in, surrounding the machine with murderous intent. Cal stepped forward, raising the plasma blade once more. "No," Elias said firmly, grabbing its arm. "We've done enough damage here. Let's go." Together, they fled into the tunnels, pursued by the relentless swarm. Behind them, the machine continued to hum, powering up systems long abandoned. Though they didn't know it yet, their actions had awakened something ancient and powerful. As they disappeared into the depths of the planet, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The glowing symbols followed them, flickering like ghostly eyes in the darkness. The tunnel stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of twisting passages that seemed to pulse faintly with the same energy coursing through Cal's armor. Elias and Cal moved quickly, their footsteps echoing off the walls as they fled from the swarm chasing them. Behind them, the hum of drones grew louder, their metallic screeches reverberating through the narrow corridors. Ahead, the glowing symbols on the walls guided their path, flickering like silent beacons urging them forward. Elias glanced over his shoulder frequently, expecting the swarm to burst into view at any moment. His breath came in ragged gasps, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him, but he forced himself to keep moving. Beside him, Cal remained steadfast, its glowing patterns dimming slightly as it conserved energy for what lay ahead. Despite the alien warrior's resilience, Elias could see signs of fatigue in its movements, slightly slower steps, less fluid gestures. They were both reaching their limits. "Not much farther," Elias muttered under his breath, more to reassure himself than anything else. He didn't know if Cal understood, but the alien clicked softly in response, a sound Elias had come to interpret as agreement or acknowledgement. It was strange how much they communicated without words now, relying on tone, body language, and those enigmatic glowing symbols to bridge the gap between their species. Finally, after what felt like hours of running, the tunnel opened up into a breathtaking sight. a hidden oasis buried deep beneath the desert planet's surface. A lush expanse of bioluminescent flora stretched out before them, casting soft hues of green, blue, and violet across the cavernous chamber. Towering trees with translucent leaves swayed gently despite the lack of wind, their roots intertwined with veins of crystalline growths that pulsed rhythmically, mimicking the glow of Kel's armor. Streams of clear water wound through the landscape, reflecting the light in shimmering ripples. For a moment, Elias forgot about the danger behind them. He stood frozen, taking in the surreal beauty of the place. Even Kale paused, its multifaceted eyes scanning the scene with an expression Elias couldn't quite read. Awe. Recognition. Whatever it was, the alien seemed just as captivated as he did. This is incredible, Elias whispered, stepping cautiously into the oasis. The ground beneath his feet felt soft, almost spongy, covered in moss-like vegetation that glowed faintly when disturbed. He knelt to examine it closer, marveling at how alive everything seemed compared to the barren wasteland above. Kale joined him, pointing toward one of the streams. Its glowing symbols flared brightly, forming patterns Elias recognized as a request for water. Nodding, Elias cupped his hands and scooped some of the liquid, drinking deeply. It was cool and refreshing, unlike anything he'd tasted before, almost sweet, with a subtle metallic tang that reminded him of the air in the tunnels. Kale followed suit, dipping its fingers into the stream and lifting droplets to its visor-covered face. Though Elias couldn't see its reaction, the alien's posture relaxed noticeably, suggesting relief. As they rested briefly, Elias noticed something unusual scattered among the flora. Remnants of structures half buried in the soil. Crumbling stone pillars etched with intricate carvings jutted out from the ground, their surfaces worn smooth by time. Fragments of metal and glass lay nearby, partially overtaken by vines and moss. Whoever, or whatever, had built this place had been gone for centuries, leaving only traces of their civilization behind. Curiosity overriding caution, Elias approached one of the pillars. Up close, he saw that the carvings bore striking similarities to the glowing symbols displayed by Kel's armor, and the ones guiding them through the tunnels. Each glyph told a story, depicting scenes of prosperity, conflict, and ultimately destruction. In one carving, towering machines resembling the biomechanical drones pursued figures fleeing into the shadows. Another showed a massive spacecraft launching into the sky, leaving behind a devastated world. These people fought the same things we're fighting, Elias said aloud, tracing the carvings with his fingertips. They lost. Kale clicked urgently, drawing Elias's attention back to the present. The hum of the swarm echoed faintly in the distance, growing louder as the drones closed in. They didn't have time to linger. Following the glowing symbols once more, they ventured deeper into the oasis, eventually discovering a central clearing dominated by the ruins of an ancient temple. Its entrance yawned wide, framed by crumbling archways adorned with faded reliefs. Inside, remnants of advanced technology still clung to life. Control panels embedded in the walls, holographic displays flickering weakly, and a large circular platform at the center of the chamber. Elias approached the platform cautiously, examining the controls etched with familiar glyphs. "This must be important," he murmured, gesturing for Kale to join him. Together, they began deciphering the mechanisms, piecing together fragments of knowledge from their earlier encounters with similar systems. Hours passed as they worked tirelessly, their combined ingenuity bridging gaps neither could overcome alone. Kale manipulated the physical components with precision, while Elias focused on activating the software interfaces using trial and error. Slowly but surely, the system powered up, emitting a low hum that resonated throughout the chamber. Suddenly, a holographic projection sprang to life above the platform, displaying images of the planet's past. Elias watched in awe as the history unfolded before him. Civilizations thriving amidst lush landscapes, technological marvels powering cities of light, and then the arrival of the biomechanical swarm. The invaders consumed everything in their path, reducing the planet to the desolate wasteland it was today. But there was hope buried within the narrative. A map showing locations where countermeasures had been developed, weapons, shields, and even a partially functional spacecraft capable of escaping the planet. "We can use this," Elias said, excitement bubbling in his chest. He pointed to the map, highlighting the nearest location marked as containing the spacecraft. Cale nodded firmly, its glowing patterns aligning with determination. But their discovery came at a cost. As the hologram faded, tremors shook the chamber, dislodging chunks of rock from the ceiling. The activation of the ancient system had triggered seismic activity, destabilizing the entire structure. Worse still, the noise attracted the swarm, which poured into the clearing moments later. "Go," Elias shouted, grabbing Cal's uninjured arm and pulling them both toward the exit. The drones swarmed around them, their jagged forms cutting through the air with lethal speed. Cal swung the plasma blade wildly, slicing through attackers while Elias fired his blaster pistol, aiming for critical weak points. They fought their way back through the oasis, trampling glowing plants and splashing through streams as they ran. Behind them, the temple collapsed in a shower of dust and debris, sealing the secrets of the ancient civilization forever. The swarm pursued relentlessly, forcing Elias and Cal to push themselves harder than ever before. When they finally reached the edge of the oasis, the swarm hesitated, unwilling or unable to follow them into the tunnels beyond. Exhausted but alive, Elias and Cal collapsed onto the rocky floor, their chests heaving as they caught their breath. "We made it," Elias panted, looking back at the glowing entrance to the oasis. "For now." Cal clicked softly, its glowing patterns dimming slightly as it recovered. Though they had survived another encounter with the swarm, Elias knew the real challenge lay ahead, finding and repairing the spacecraft before the biomechanical horde found them again. Together, they rose and continued onward, guided by the map etched into Elias's memory and the unwavering resolve of two warriors united by circumstance. The desert planet still held many secrets and dangers, but for the first time since crashing here, Elias allowed himself to believe they might actually escape. The journey to the location marked on the map was grueling. The tunnels twisted unpredictably, their walls lined with faintly glowing crystals that cast eerie shadows as Elias and Cal pressed onward. Each step felt heavier than the last, not just from physical exhaustion, but from the weight of what lay ahead. They were closer than ever to escaping this desolate planet, yet every moment brought new dangers, collapsing ceilings, venomous creatures lurking in the dark, and the ever-present threat of the biomechanical swarm. Elias clutched the plasma blade tightly in one hand, his blaster pistol in the other. Cal walked beside him, its glowing armor pulsating rhythmically, a silent reminder of the bond they had forged over weeks of shared hardship. Though neither spoke, their movements were synchronized now, each instinctively covering the other's blind spots. Trust had become second nature, even though they came from worlds apart. Finally, after hours of navigating the labyrinthine tunnels, they emerged into a massive underground hangar. At its center stood the partially functional spacecraft Elias had seen in the holographic projection. It was sleek and angular, designed for speed rather than bulk, with engines that gleamed faintly despite centuries of disuse. Panels along its hull bore intricate patterns similar to those etched into the walls of the temple, suggesting it belonged to the same advance. "This is it," Elias said, stepping cautiously toward the ship. His voice echoed through the cavernous space, bouncing off the high ceiling. "If we can get this thing running, we're out of here." Cal clicked in agreement, scanning the area for threats. The alien's multifaceted eyes caught details Elias missed, a faint shimmer in the air near the entrance, the subtle hum of distant machinery. Something wasn't right. As they approached the spacecraft, the ground trembled beneath their feet. A low rumble filled the chamber, growing louder with each passing second. From the shadows at the far end of the hangar, figures began to emerge, tall, armored beings with elongated limbs and weapons crackling with energy. Their forms were unmistakably Verathi, Cal's own species. Elias froze, his grip tightening on the plasma blade. He turned to Cal, confusion etched across his face. "Are these your people?" Cal hesitated, its glowing patterns dimming momentarily before flaring brightly. It stepped forward, raising its uninjured arm in a gesture of peace. The Verathi warriors responded with hostility, leveling their weapons at both Elias and Cal. One of them stepped forward, a commander judging by the ornate markings on its armor. Its voice boomed through the hangar, sharp clicks and hums forming words Elias couldn't understand. But Cal understood all too well. Its posture stiffened, and its glowing symbols flashed erratically, conveying distress. "They think I'm a traitor," Cal communicated to Elias through gestures and symbols. "They don't trust humans." Elias frowned, his mind racing. "Tell them we're allies. We've been working together to survive." Cal tried, its glowing patterns shifting rapidly as it explained their situation. But the commander cut it off with an angry bark, gesturing dismissively at Elias. To them, he was nothing more than a primitive intruder, an enemy who didn't deserve mercy. Tensions escalated quickly. When one of the Verathi raised its weapon, aiming directly at Elias, Cal stepped in front of him protectively. The alien warriors shouted in unison, their weapons charging ominously. Elias tightened his grip on the plasma blade, ready to fight if necessary. "We don't have time for this," Elias muttered under his breath. "The swarm will be here any minute." As if on cue, the unmistakable buzz of the biomechanical drones echoed through the tunnel leading into the hangar. The swarm had found them. Panic spread among the Verathi warriors as the first wave of drones burst into the chamber, their jagged forms slicing through the air with lethal precision. Chaos erupted instantly. Weapons fired, filling the hangar with bursts of light and deafening explosions. Elias and Cal dove behind a stack of crates, using the cover to regroup. "We need to get to the ship," Elias yelled over the din. "Now." Cal nodded, its glowing symbols aligning with determination. Together, they sprinted toward the spacecraft, dodging blasts and swarms of drones. Behind them, the Verathi fought valiantly, their advanced weaponry cutting down dozens of attackers. But the swarm was relentless, overwhelming them with sheer numbers. Reaching the spacecraft, Elias climbed aboard first, searching frantically for controls to activate the engines. Cal followed close behind, helping him decipher the unfamiliar interface. The ship roared to life, its systems powering up with a deep hum that resonated through the hangar. But as they prepared to launch, Cal stopped suddenly. Its glowing patterns dimmed, and it turned back toward the battle raging outside. Elias realized immediately what the alien intended to do. "No," Elias shouted, grabbing Cal's arm. "You can't stay. We need you." Cal clicked softly, placing a steady hand on Elias's shoulder. Its glowing symbols flared once more, conveying a message Elias couldn't misinterpret. "Protect my people. Tell them the truth." Before Elias could protest further, Cal leaped from the ship, drawing the plasma blade as it charged back into the fray. With a roar of defiance, it unleashed a devastating attack, slicing through drones and creating a brief opening for the remaining Verathi to retreat. Elias watched in stunned silence as Cal fought with unmatched ferocity, holding the swarm at bay long enough for the others to escape. Tears welled in his eyes as he realized the full extent of Cal's sacrifice. This warrior, this unlikely ally, had given everything to ensure their survival. "Thank you," Elias whispered, his voice breaking. Then, with a heavy heart, he activated the spacecraft's thrusters. The engines roared louder, propelling the ship upward through a narrow shaft leading to the surface. As they broke free of the planet's atmosphere, Elias looked back one last time, catching a glimpse of the battlefield below. Cal's glowing armor pulsed faintly amidst the chaos, a beacon of courage and selflessness. Decivilization. Once in orbit, Elias set a course for the nearest human outpost. Exhaustion hit him like a tidal wave, but he forced himself to stay awake, piecing together everything he had learned about the biomechanical swarm and Kel's people. He owed it to Kel to honor its memory, to warn humanity and the Veyrathi of the true threat they faced. As the stars stretched endlessly before him, Elias made a solemn vow. Kel's sacrifice would not be in vain. Together, humans and Veyrathi would stand united against the swarm, and perhaps, in doing so, forge a new alliance built on mutual respect and understanding. For now, though, Elias allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He traced the glowing symbol etched onto his armor, the same one Kel had used to communicate, and whispered softly, "I won't forget you." The journey to the human outpost was long and lonely. Elias sat in the cockpit of the spacecraft, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. The hum of the engines filled the silence, but it did little to drown out the thoughts swirling in his mind. Kel's sacrifice weighed heavily on him, not just as a personal loss, but as a reminder of what they had both fought for. Survival wasn't enough. Unity was the only way forward. When the outpost finally came into view, a sprawling station orbiting a distant moon, Elias felt a mix of relief and apprehension. He knew what he had to do, but convincing others wouldn't be easy. Humans and Veyrathi had been enemies for generations, their conflicts rooted in centuries of mistrust and violence. Yet here he was, prepared to argue that their shared enemy, the biomechanical swarm known as the Xirath, was far greater than any animosity between them. As the spacecraft docked, Elias took a deep breath and stepped onto the platform. The airlock hissed open, revealing a team of soldiers clad in Interstellar Defense Corps uniforms. They approached cautiously, weapons drawn, until one of them recognized the insignia on his armor. "Captain Drake?" asked a young officer, lowering her rifle slightly. "We thought you were dead." "I almost was," Elias replied, his voice steady despite the fatigue etched into his face. "But I've got information that can't wait. Where's Commander Hayes?" The officer hesitated, then gestured for him to follow. "This way, sir." Elias recounted everything during the debriefing. His crash landing on the desert planet, his alliance with Kel, the discovery of the ancient civilization, and the devastating power of the Veyrath. Every detail mattered, every moment counted. When he described Kel's sacrifice, his voice cracked, betraying the depth of his grief. The room fell silent as the assembled officers absorbed the gravity of his words. Commander Hayes leaned forward, his expression grim. "You're saying the Veyrathi aren't our real enemies? That we've been fighting the wrong war all along?" "Yes," Elias said firmly. "Kel proved that. It gave its life, not just for me, but for all of us, for humanity and the Veyrathi alike. If we don't work together, none of us will survive." Hayes exchanged glances with the other officers before nodding slowly. "It's a hard pill to swallow, but your evidence is compelling. We'll reach out to the Veyrathi leadership immediately. If they're willing to listen, maybe we can broker a truce." Days passed as negotiations unfolded. Messages were sent and received. Tensions flared and subsided, but eventually representatives from both sides agreed to meet aboard a neutral space station. Elias attended the summit, standing alongside Commander Hayes as the Veyrathi delegation entered the conference room. Their leader, a towering figure adorned with ornate armor, bore an uncanny resemblance to Kel. For a fleeting moment, Elias felt a pang of sorrow, but also determination. The talks were tense at first, each side wary of betrayal. But when Elias stepped forward to speak, his words carried weight. He recounted his experiences on the desert planet, emphasizing Kel's bravery and the truths they had uncovered together. As he spoke, the Veyrathi leader's posture softened slightly, recognition flickering in their multifaceted eyes. "You knew Kel?" the leader asked, their voice resonating deeply. Elias nodded, showing them the glowing symbol etched onto his armor. the same one Kel had used to communicate. "It saved my life," Elias said simply. "And yours too, if we don't act now." The room grew quiet as the implications sank in. Slowly, the Verathi leader extended a hand, or rather, a claw-like appendage, in a gesture of peace. Commander Hayes mirrored the action, sealing the agreement with a firm grip. For the first time in history, humans and Verathi stood united against a common threat. In the weeks that followed, joint operations began. Scientists from both species worked tirelessly to reverse engineer the ancient technology Elias and Kel had discovered, while military strategists devised plans to combat the Kyrath. Training exercises brought human and Verathi soldiers side by side, forging bonds where hatred once existed. Though progress was slow and fraught with challenges, the seeds of cooperation had been planted. Elias found himself leading many of these efforts, his experience making him uniquely qualified to bridge the gap between the two species. He wore Kel's symbol proudly on his armor, a constant reminder of the debt he owed, and the promise he intended to keep. Months later, Elias stood aboard a massive warship, a marvel of combined human-Verathi engineering. Its sleek design incorporated elements from both civilizations, blending strength with agility. Around him, crews bustled about, preparing for the mission ahead, a direct assault on the Kyrath's primary hive world. As the ship launched into hyperspace, Elias gazed out at the stars, his thoughts drifting back to Kale. He imagined the alien warrior standing beside him, its glowing armor pulsating rhythmically, its multifaceted eyes scanning the horizon with quiet resolve. Though Kale was gone, its legacy lived on in every alliance formed, every life saved, every step taken toward a better future. "We'll finish this," Elias whispered, tracing the glowing symbol on his armor one last time. "For you." The warship surged forward, carrying hope and determination into the unknown. Together, humanity and the Verathi would face the Kyrath and win. And though the road ahead would be perilous, Elias knew they wouldn't walk it alone. Kel's light would guide them, even in the darkest of times.